Okay, we talked about this potential EU law just a couple of months ago, and now it seems like they're going forward with it. And a lot of people are thinking, okay, is the EU going a little too far in a few places? That's the discussion we're having today. Let's begin. So I think a lot of us here in the tech community were on board with the iPhone switching to USB-C. It's the superior connector, it does faster data transfer, it does better charging speeds, and it's already on all of our other Apple products, so come on, Apple. We've all kind of accepted it now with how many leaks are pointing to it, but it felt like the EU definitely was influencing Apple's decision on this, which a lot of us are like, I don't care how it has to happen, I just want USB-C on the iPhone. But I've seen a lot of those same people thinking, okay, mandating batteries be easily swappable on the iPhone might go a little bit too far. And it's not because we're against right to repair or we're against there being easily swappable batteries. It's just that we understand a lot has changed with smartphones since they had easily swappable batteries compared to now. So it's not like you can just easily check a box and say, okay, everything about the iPhone stays the same. It just happens to now have a swappable battery. A lot of us are thinking, okay, if it's supposed to be easily swappable, what does that mean for water resistance? Or what does that mean for wireless charging? Or how big the battery can be? That's another bigger issue we had in the past with smartphones that had easily to swap batteries, because you have to make those batteries a lot more solid and rigid because they're not sealed up inside of a phone, so they can't be as flimsy or as easy to puncture as traditional battery cells are built today because they're protected by the phone itself. All of that extra sealant and protection that goes into those battery packs ate into the actual size the battery could be. So I think the big debate here is what the EU constitutes as easily swappable. And I think a lot of people didn't really look into the law and its specific wording on that, because people just assume this means, oh, I need to be able to take off the back of my phone with a fingernail and have an old-fashioned, like Samsung style, just pull out the battery pack and swap in a new one and put the case on the back, in which case water resistance would probably be a lot more tricky with that kind of phone, and the overall capacity of the battery pack is not going to be as good because you have to accommodate for all of this extra protection when that back is taken off and when that cell is outside of the phone. It has to be somewhat protected. But if you read into the actual wording of the law, I think people are making this out to be a lot bigger of an issue than it really is, but I still think it's an important discussion for us all to have. How far is too far for a government body? And the specific wording is suggesting that there can still be tools to access the battery pack. It's just that those tools can't be proprietary. They have to be available to third parties, and they have to be reasonably affordable, whatever that means. And essentially, the battery pack just needs to be easy for an everyday person to replace using easily accessible tools, but I don't think that necessarily means it has to be as easy as you can just pull the back of the phone off with a fingernail and have an old-fashioned battery module on the back. I don't believe that's what this law is pointing to. It probably just is going to result in Apple having to change the screws on the bottom of the iPhone, or at least the screwdrivers that you need to have access to for those tools, so that anybody can open up the iPhone and maybe not have to worry so much about battery pull tabs and just have a few easy to remove screws on the inside that let you take out the old battery, put in the new one. And just for the record, this law does not go into effect until 2027. So don't expect it to have any design influence on the iPhone 15 or even the iPhone 16. We've got some time before Apple has to actually start implementing these changes. But personally, as much as I was kind of against it in my last video talking about it, because I think that, okay, you want to preserve and prioritize like ease of battery swapping so that phones can last a long time, and you don't want it to be this thing companies start paywalling so that we have all of this e-waste or people with batteries that are degraded so much and it costs so much to replace them and they have to go through Apple and everything that they end up just buying a new phone. Yeah, I get the logic of why the government wants to get involved. I just hope that it doesn't come at the cost of the actual phone functionality, like the water resistance, the wireless charging, as well as durability and of course the battery capacity. But my hope is by 2027, we're probably going to be on, either 3nm architecture, 2nm architecture, so that even if battery modules in phones take a little bit of a shrinkage, the battery life will still be great because the phone will be super efficient, as will the displays that we use with them. And hopefully iPhones will be at a point where just with a few screws on the outside and on the inside, you won't need some complex step-by-step guide with 70 different processes and a heat gun and everything in order to replace everything inside the phone. I'm all in favor of more easier to swap batteries, as long as you can still retain the water resistance, still retain the durability, still keep the wireless charging and MagSafe support and everything. As long as you can keep all of that, then I think this would probably be a win for the consumer. And what the EU mandates, I still think will likely have an effect on the rest of the world. It's a huge market, so I don't think Apple's going to pull out of it as much as you guys may want them to. And I don't think there's that many changes they can make between the US iPhone and the EU iPhone. Simple things like SIM tray versus no SIM tray, I don't think are that complicated, but when it comes to the fundamental implementation of the battery cells and the screws and all that, I think it makes far more sense to just have a widespread adoption of all iPhones are going to have more easily replaceable batteries. And Apple's been making more progress on their self-service repair program anyway, with more and more modules of the iPhone able to be replaced and upgraded by individual consumers without having to go straight to Apple. So overall, I think people are assuming too much by this law and just assuming what it means without reading into the terminology and understanding. I think there's a way the EU can be happy and the iPhone won't have to be compromised in any way, or at least in any noticeable way. Like maybe the battery life could be 5% better if it wasn't as easily replaceable, but are we really going to notice that big an impact? And is this going to help people prolong the life of their iPhone and be able to replace the battery for much, much cheaper? I'm hoping that's the case, but I still stand by my point that I hope the EU doesn't start enforcing things on the iPhone that start impeding on how good of a product it can be and start making the phone overall worse. That's when I'm going to start saying, okay, I think they're going a bit too far. And for some of you, maybe this change is still too far. Is a 5% battery penalty too much of a compromise for the sake of, well, we want to reduce e-waste or we want repairability to be more accessible to the masses? I don't know. Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.